Before we start this episode of Changing Hearts and Minds, I want to take a moment to remember that this past weekend was Memorial Day weekend. It's a time for us to be somber, thankful, and take time to remember those who gave all while serving, both in the military and as first responders. It's not just combat vets who should also be remembered, but those that also gave their lives doing the day-to-day jobs that they signed up to do in the military. Often forgotten or shadowed by the combat vets or by the first responders who died doing their jobs, I want to take some time to not just honor some combat vets, but also honor those that gave their lives or lost their lives just while serving. And I asked a bunch of the Changing Hearts and Minds listeners and some of the guys who were a little bit more involved that I know personally to help me honor some of those guys by giving me the names of some of the people that they want to remember and they want to bring up. First, Petty Officer 2nd Class retired Tim Lease and Petty Officer 3rd Class retired Wix Chrysilis. Both want to remember the sailors of the USS Saratoga. During the Gulf War in 1990, the USS Saratoga was making its way for Christmas break, and on December 22nd of 1990, a horrible accident involving a ferry bringing soldiers back to the Saratoga occurred. The ferry actually capsized and sank, and most of the soldiers, 110 who were on the ferry, went into the water. Although members like Petty Officer 2nd Class Tim Lease and Petty Officer 3rd Class Wix Chrysilis, and among others, tried their best to save all the soldiers, 21 of those soldiers did lose their lives. I want you to name those soldiers now. Anthony J. Fleming, 25, of Buffalo, New York. Michael Billevue, 24-year-old of Lakewood, Colorado. Christopher B. Brown, 19, of Leslie, Georgia. Darrell K. Brown, 19, of Memphis, Tennessee. Moonray Carrington, 22, of North Braddock, Pennsylvania. Larry Clark, 21, of Decanter, Georgia. Delwyn Delgado, 26, of Jacksonville, Florida. Gilbert Fontaine, 22, of Spring Valley, New York. Wilton Hughes, 20, of St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. Timothy Jackson, 20, of Anniston, Alabama. Alexander Jones, 19, of St. Louis, Missouri. Nathaniel Kemp, 18, of Greenwood, Florida. Brent McCrate, 23, of Eminence, Kentucky. And Randy Neal, 19, of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Marvin Plummer, 27, of Point Verdon Beach, Florida. Matthew Schindler, 20, of Herbert, Oregon. Timothy Say, 22, of Thomaston, Georgia. Jeffrey Satimi, 25, of Fort Wayne, Indiana. Roderick Stewart, 20, of Shreveport, Louisiana. Jeffrey Shuckers, 28, of Union, Iowa. And last but not least, Philip Wilkinson, 35, of Savannah, Georgia. These sailors of the USS Saratoga, who died on December 22, 1990, we remember you. Also, another soldier who lost their lives not serving in combat, but unfortunately lost their life in a motor vehicle accident. Staff Sergeant retired Louis Dunn remembers Staff Sergeant Antonio Almendarez. Antonio Almendarez joined the Marines at 17, then later in the Army. He had 17 years of service, 2 tours of Iraq, 1 in Bosnia, 1 in Haiti. He was a husband and father. He died September 4, 2010, in a motor vehicle accident. He was assigned at the time to the 407th BSB, 2nd BCT, 82nd Airborne Division. Marine Colonel Dave Doolin gave me a list of some Marines that he had served with and knew, that also he wants to remember this Memorial Day. PFC Brandon Smith, Iraq 2004. PFC Ricky Morris, Iraq 2004. Corporal Jason Dunham, Iraq 2004. Lance Corporal Chance Phelps, Iraq 2004. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Robinson, Afghanistan 2007. And First Lieutenant David Jones, Kuwait of 1991. And finally, I'd like to remember someone personally that I knew. I want to remember a friend and a brother, Staff Sergeant Aaron Bellagio. He was a husband, father, and a very good friend. He gave his life in Afghanistan on 29 May 2011. He was a Green Beret assigned to 3rd Special Forces Group. Aaron, you are missed, brother, and you will never be forgotten. For him, for the others that we mentioned, and for all of those who have given their lives in service to their country, to their communities, and to us, We remember you. We will never forget.
Can you keep a secret?
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds. Changing hearts and minds. Changing hearts and minds.
Changing hearts and minds.
Welcome to Change Your POV podcast. You're listening to Changing Hearts and Minds, a show about reviving the warrior spirit and remembering the past to improve our future. I'm your host, Jeff Adamick. Let's get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I totally screwed or what? You're funny.
I want to discuss all this behavior.
Let me out of here!
Welcome to this week's episode of Changing Hearts and Minds. My name is Jeff Adamick. I am your host, and guys, it is a big day for me here at Changing Hearts and Minds. This is the first time in the history of the show that I'm actually sitting down with people in front of me. This is not me hiding in my kid's bedroom at my house with Chris on a Skype phone call making faces at the computer when he doesn't say things right. I am actually sitting in front of Chris and my other guests, and we are not going to be able to make the faces that I normally make, so I might actually feel a little stifled here, but it's okay. It's just because I'm trying to be respectful. But I want to let you guys know that this week here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and this will be after the event is happening, but there is a USO fundraiser that is happening here in Fayetteville, North Carolina, that the company Tactical 16, which is a publishing company, has come in to bring some of its authors down for this event. I think on the front page of their website, Tactical 16 says it best with a quote by Maya Angelou, where it says, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." I want to welcome back to the show one of our previous guests, Chris Schaefer. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Doing great, Jeff. Thanks, man. It's a pleasure always to be on your show, and I'm glad that I can get with you, actually, after many years. So,
yeah, it's been quite a long time. The last time we talked, it was over the Skype call. We didn't get to see each other, but, you know, it's always nice to get back and see old brothers from group. As you guys remember, Chris is a former Green Beret who, well, you know what? I'm not even going to get into that. Chris, why don't you go ahead and remind our listeners who you are again? So let you sell yourself instead of me blowing your head up.
Yeah, well, I did 25 years in the Army, and I had some fun, so let's leave it at that, brother.
Fair enough. Now you after you did Intrepid Professionals, which was the book that you had written when you were on last time, you now have your own publishing company. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened, what came about, how the Tactical 16 came about?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I'm actually the Chief Operating Officer. It's more of a title than anything. Eric Shaw, the founder, just reached out and said, "Hey, Chris, can you help me out with the day-to-day operations?" And so, I was like, "Yeah, hell yeah, man. I'd love to help you out with that." And so, you know how it is, man. Work usually finds you.
Right.
And you don't go looking for it. Even when you do, sometimes you don't find it. So
sometimes when you have the work is when the other work finds you. It's
right.
When you're looking really hard for it, you don't find it. But then when you have a job or have the work you need, then more work seems to come and find its
right,
way
exactly. So that's kind of how that all happened. And, I had little jobs here and there and done some consulting here and there. But, this is fun. I mean, I get to be around, these other authors that have done great things and been great places. And this event is going to be huge. Obviously, this will broadcast after it's done. But, Tactical 16 is just that unique story that's uncommonly told. And, we got such great authors that write these stories that nobody would know unless they wrote it.
Right.
Right.
Right from your guys' actual webpage, your mission says it's to provide low-cost to no-cost alternative to self-publishing by creating a custom plan for each author in order for them to achieve their goal. So are you targeting or are you looking for the military veterans themselves, or is it more broad where anybody that wants to be an author, anybody that wants to have something to say, obviously, about military stuff, can get with you guys and work towards getting their work published? So,
yeah, we have discussed that a lot between Eric and I. And, we are not solely focused on the military writer. As you know, writing is very therapeutic in the sense of overcoming post-traumatic stress.
Yes, it is.
Eric told me, he goes, "Man, you're going to face some demons that you thought you put away." And I was like, yeah, get out of here, dude. There ain't no way. I faced all my demons. And, that came back to me. I had some rough days, but I think we talked about that, some rough nights. And, but, so that is kind of the concept, but it's not just solely for that. There's great stories out there that need to be told from all over the place. Sports authorities to, people that had never been in the military. We're talking first responders, stuff like that. So, that's our mantra is really to try to get those unique stories that aren't commonly told.
Right. So what would you, for the people out there who would be thinking about reaching out to you or these people who want to be authors or these authors in waiting, what is the advantage of going through Tactical 16 rather than trying to be self-published? Yeah.
So, and I'm going to put this out to everybody that's listening. Self-publishing can be a task and of itself.
I'm well aware.
and it really does cost a lot of money. Once you start thinking about editors and copywriters and, people to do your covers and, print and all this other stuff. Even book in a box. So, if anybody's ever thought about doing book in a box, they'll do your book. And really all they do is doing an interview with you. But they're also going to charge you about $25,000 up front.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's a lot of overhead.
Right. And that's, how many books you got to sell. But, those guys do it in a method that really approaches the author for what their goal set is for that book. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So if it's just to get the story out, great. But a lot of those people that have that kind of cash to go to book in the box and put down $25,000, have a different motive that they want to do with that book. So, we don't want to do that Tactical 16. We just really want people to be able to tell their story. And that's the biggest thing, man,
So if there was somebody out there that was interested in getting in touch with your company or reaching out to you to find out more information, how would they go about doing that?
Easy. Just get on the website, tactical16.com. We got a contact us page right there. Just send it out. We do have a new process since I took over as a chief operating officer, and we start with a phone call because we want to make sure that what your goals are fit with kind of what we're trying to do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. You don't have Stephen King calling Marvel Comics to write his new 900-page book. You have to make sure that they're within the type of topic and the genre that you guys put out. So that makes sense.
And then from there, we created a book proposal that we send out so that we can kind of understand what the goal is in more detail. Because as well as I do, you can talk about it all day, but until you put it in writing, it means nothing.
Right. Sometimes when you put it in writing, people will still say it means nothing.
Right. Briefs well, but until you put it on paper, it's like, ooh, well, I didn't think about this.
Yeah. So for those of you out there who want to get in touch with Tactical 16, I will have links on the show notes page for this. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys out there. You're probably going to see how this whole process goes because, as I've already talked with Chris, I'm going to be utilizing Chris's company and his organization to try to put out my next book. So that's going to be something that maybe you guys as the Changing Hearts and Minds listeners can follow me through that process as I go through with Chris and his company putting out my next book. And so I think I just dropped that in Chris's laps, but that was a little bit of a bonus on top. So you guys will see what the whole process is like. And I recommend if you're out there and you've got a story to tell, do not hesitate to reach out to Chris. Get out, even if you don't reach out to Chris. Get out there, get on your computer, get on a piece of paper, and start writing your story down. And try doing it every single day because the more you write, the easier it's going to get. Yeah. And for those of you who need the therapy of writing, you're going to realize that you're going to start feeling better, and you're going to start putting things out there that you never thought were deep inside of you. As Chris says, you will face some demons and everything like that. Well, Chris, what are you guys doing in town this week? What's going on? I know it's going to be after the fact, but let's talk about the event that's going down tomorrow.
Right. So we are trying to raise some funds for the USO. As you know, as soldiers, we've always had experiences with the USO.
Right.
And great people, a lot of them volunteers. What I didn't know is that your USO is a locally funded deal. So it's not like they get funds from somebody else.
Right.
Okay, like regional or anything
right.
like that. If you go to the BWI airport and you run into the USO there, that is funded from that local area.
Right.
So with that being said, they have to strive very hard to get funds to be able to operate, to give us those packets, the free coffee,
right?
All that stuff,
Understood,
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyways, we are trying to raise some money from them, and we've got great authors from Tactical 16 that took some time to come out here, and it was all spurred by All American Week. And you know something about that. I know something about that.
Yeah, we spent a little bit of time in the Deuce before we were in group.
Right.
Yes, so you guys know we're not sitting, it's not just me and Chris sitting here inside a hotel lobby. We actually have 3 of the authors here with us, and we're gonna go and talk with each one of those authors. But real quick, Chris, go ahead and who we got here with us today?
So I got Robert Dvorak. He wrote A Drive On. He was the embed with the 82nd Airborne, which is a great story. It's just I've been reading his book. I'm not completed with it yet, but kind of his journal of what happened during the war, and it's
Which
real,
war?
Desert Storm.
Okay, that's important.
So yeah, I totally forgot to mention that.
We want to make sure that people don't think that we're
right.
It was World War One.
Yeah,
the 82nd Infantry
Well, yeah,
Division.
man, it was a long time ago. I mean, Robert is a little old. I mean,
That's me, man. He's sitting right next to
I
you.
know, that's all right.
He's right here. It's not even like we got him on hold. It's all right. He's giving you the look.
Me and Alvin York were both.
Alvin York.
Fair enough. Who else you got here with you?
That's right. Julia Mackey, and she's our strange little bird, but great book. Navy, now Air Force, did some spooky stuff. She was telling us earlier that she was chasing drug lords in certain countries.
Oh, is that a little
so,
Central Spike work going down?
Yeah, she was.
I read that book.
Very cool. And then our even stranger bird, because he's the civilian out of the group, but Andrew Oak, and what's great is that he wrote about all the first ladies, which is cool.
That is kind of
cool.
You
know what I'm saying? So it's all history. It's and you get a broad view of how that influences us,
right?
Because I don't think anybody really ever thinks about that.
No, everyone always talks about. I mean, other than maybe Dolly Madison, who everyone knows that as the president was running off to save his skin, she was saving portraits of the presidents.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of people who don't know a lot of the stories. With here and there exceptions, everyone knows about Jackie Onassis and everything. But there's a lot of stories of all the first ladies that a lot of people don't know. So I'll be interested once he gets around here on the table. Once we do the Chinese fire drill shuffle of seats. But to really make her really uncomfortable, why don't we get Julie over here and we'll start getting into her portion of the interview.
Absolutely.
And we'll move on with her. And you guys are going to hear a little bit of shuffling. That's because I did the really good thing of doing my PCIs, making sure that both my microphones worked before I left my house. But what I didn't do was bring 2 cables. And then by the time I got here with it, there was 1 cable that was broke. So now we're working on 1 microphone. Julia A. Mackey is a Navy veteran. She generally writes children's books. And some of her children's books out there are My Mom Hunts Submarines, which sounds like a great children's book. All Hands on Deck, Dad's Coming Home. Or as my wife called it, Oh Hell, Shit's About to Hit the Fan, Dad's Coming Home. Still My Dad, or as my kids like to say, Are You Still My Dad? And From the Sky. No, I'm kidding. Still My Dad and From the Sky, which are all children's books. She is one of the Tactical 16 book authors, and her Tactical 16 book that she just released is What They Didn't Teach You in Deer River. Julia, welcome to Changing Hearts and Minds.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you nervous?
No.
Are you sure?
Not at all. No.
Okay. Don't worry. Don't be nervous. It's just you, me, and 20,000 people listening.
No
I'm just
pressure
kidding.
at all.
There's not 20. I don't have 20,000 listeners. It's actually me downloading my show 20,000 times, and everyone thinks that I've got 20,000 listeners. But it's just me and my 2 kids and my wife, them poor people. So, Julia, go ahead and tell us, because I don't like to do introductions of people unless they really, really forget who they are, like Chris. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and where you come from.
Okay, sure. So I'm from tiny little town, northern Minnesota. I joined the military 20 years ago, back in 1997, 21 I guess now, when they had just opened up combat air crew, well, a couple years prior. So I joined the Navy to fly and hunt submarines. That wasn't what I knew I was doing at the time when I joined, but I knew I wanted to go travel, see the world. I wanted to fly, and they had an opening on P3s, so that's where I ended up doing anti-submarine warfare, which is a multi-platform aircraft as well. So we did the counter-narcotic operations like we were speaking about, as well as we did intel work, over Kosovo, Bosnia, during everything that was going on there. So then also, I did 5 years. I got out, met my husband, had a family, and as you mentioned, 15 years later, now I am in the Air Force now. So as a National Guards member in the DC Capitol Guardians. So it's really unconventional. I mean, not a lot of people have a 15-year break and go from Navy to Air Force.
Well, you really didn't have a 15-year break. You moved on to become an author. So how did that come about? How did you decide to start writing books and the type of books that you were writing?
Well, I've always enjoyed writing ever since I was a kid. I had tons of stories that I was telling. And then just telling stories to my kids after I had kids, that was kind of my inspiration behind my children's books. And my very first book, My Mom Hunts Submarines, obviously came about from what I did. And my main goal behind that is that if there's any lesson that I want to teach my children is there isn't anything you can't do if you work hard enough. And that's kind of the resounding theme throughout that book, because it talks about, getting up, flying planes, and hey, if my mom can fly in planes and hunt submarines, then I can do anything.
Right. It's a true story and it's a good message. So
that just kind of led into the next one with I had to write one for the dads then. I had a lot of people.
Well, you didn't have to, but if you don't, the dads whine and complain like a bunch of babies that they don't get their book.
I mean, there are a lot of books for the dads already, but I was just going to say. But so I wrote the All Hands on Deck Dads Coming Home. That was for children that have parents that are deployed. And I kind of based that off of the shipboard side of things. My younger sister enlisted, and she was on the USS Stennis out in Bremerton. So I kind of based it around the cool things, aspects of the ship. And so I talked about that. And then that led to Still My Dad, as you had mentioned, which I wrote for children that have parents that are wounded veterans coming home, as we have tens of thousands of them. And I kind of focused more on the physically disabled side of things. It was kind of easier to write. And I focused on the service dog as an aid to that. It's a heavy subject, obviously, but that's the reality of so many children across the country right now. So I wanted to write how they're adapting to their new norm, and that's what stemmed that book. And then From the Sky was just more lighthearted, scientific almost book written about all the cool things that I saw when I was flying, because I have such a love for flying, such as
UFOs.
Yes, the UFOs in the sky. No, but did you know that a rainbow is a complete circle from the sky? When you look down, you can see the bottom of the rainbow.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either until I'm flying along, and there's a rainbow.
So there's no pot of gold?
There's no pot of gold. I know. It's kind of
Lucky Charms box of cereal's been lying to me all these years.
I know, right? So I was like, wow, they didn't teach me this in science, or maybe I didn't pay attention, perhaps.
So it's actually, it goes beyond just being a book about the military. You actually talk about some scientific things that have to do with aviation?
Absolutely. And that book isn't really military focused at all. It's more just aviation, and how I kind of focused it on like how a bird would see the world, and how it's just such a different world from the sky. The northern lights, the rainbow, like I said, an iceberg, islands looking down. Just it's such a different world. And I spent over 1,300 hours in that different world. So this is where the inspiration came from in my 5 years.
Impressive. So let's talk about a little bit about what is different about this the new book, What They Don't Teach You in Deer River. It's obviously, from what we talked about before the show started, this is not a children's book either.
No,
not at all. So what's different about this book, and what made you decide that you wanted to go forward with going a little bit outside of your normal genre and your normal target audience and write a book along this lines?
Well, I think this is what I enjoy writing more than anything. I do a lot of blogging for just random funny stories that inspire me, and I learn a lesson out of everything, every stupid thing that happens to me, I feel like. And that's almost where it started from. I'm an awkward, clumsy type person anyway, so when I joined the military and I'm around all these multi-million-dollar aircrafts, you have stories of me like walking out in front of the radar and falling down the aircraft ladder and all these things that I started off like I just kind of wanted to capture them and write these down and the lessons learned out of them. But as that evolved, I kind of just started writing it in the middle from all these little things that inspired me. But then it grew to more like I wanted to write this story about this, one of my officers that like really stood up for us and helped us out in this situation that went bad, and or to honor them, or to honor all the guys that I served with that were my family, my air crew. They would have done anything in the world, as you know. That's what we're doing it for, the people next to us. And this was kind of my book to honor them.
So going into more of that, why don't you give us one of your stories? And get you, because we are a explicitly rated podcast, and no, that doesn't mean we go off and drop F-bombs everywhere, but don't feel like you have to hold back. Give us one of your stories from the book, and obviously don't spoil your book for us, but one of your more favorite stories that are in there that you think people would be amused to hear.
Well, like I kind of, I'll piggyback on how I introed the walking out in front of the radar one. Just because it was a really big lesson learned that day. So we walked, we were prepping, pre-flighting all day out on the tarmac in Iceland. And so we were there in the middle of the winter time. It was completely pitch black, dark. We only had like an hour of sunlight during the winter there. And plane was all ready to go. We had checked all of our gear and all that. Had a few minutes to kill before takeoff, and a few of the other guys were prepping their stuff. So we ran in, grabbed some food to take with us for our, we can stay up in flight 10 to 12 hours if needed. So as we were coming out, my Sensor 1, who is the guy that was training me because I was very, very junior at that time. I had just gotten to the squadron. He's like, hey, I'll meet you out at the plane. Come out when you're ready. So I was waiting, got all my stuff, was walking out to the plane, and it was completely black other than these big floodlights shining in my face because I came out from a different door. And that normally should have been my first clue, like, don't keep walking. But I was like, well, everything's good. I got my sandwich. I'm all happy for this flight. And I, walked around and la, 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 la. Happen to look up and I see the strobe lights flash. And I'm like, I know that means something bad. And, I'm thinking, what did my class say? Oh, that's the radar emitting. And also the big taxi lights that were blinding me was saying that was the radar emitting as well. So there's a 250-foot standoff where the radar emitting. So I was more concerned about getting in trouble that time than I was frying myself. So I just started backing up slowly, hoping nobody saw me. And all of a sudden all the lights shut off. The door opens. My Sensor 3 was there. And he's like, Chief wants to talk to you. And
bring him that hot open-faced sandwich that you just got from the cold sandwich bar.
Yes. So my chief was like this huge, scary Croatian man that was like 6'5", head to toe in hair and everything. He's kind of Bigfoot, I'm from the northern country. So anyway, terrifying specimen. I was like, okay, and I walk up the stairs, and he nods to the back, and I go sit down in the galley where he's just sitting there and doesn't even look up. And his first words when he looked up at me were like, do you want to fucking fry your ovaries? But this was in a big, booming voice. And I didn't know how to answer that exactly.
Not too sure. I mean, I'm still young enough. I don't know. I mean, do we have other options for birth control? I don't know.
Exactly. So, no, Chief, I don't. So, all he said was, that's one. And then get out of here. So, I didn't know if that meant that I had more chances.
He was Croatian. You probably couldn't count to 5, so you can at least know there's 4. So.
Right. Well, and then one time I forgot to take out the garbage, so I got up to 2. I never made it to 3. I don't know what happens after 3, but anyway, so this is just an example of all these dumb things that happened to me along the way. And, he was actually the most amazing leader that I ended up having after the fear wore off, and, I figured out what I was doing a little bit better.
So what is it? A great story, by the way, and that is... As I'm watching Chris over here, I'm pissing his pants laughing at this story, and it is good because I can just imagine that you're just oblivious to the danger that you were in by walking up on these radars. I mean, for example, we were always told on the GMVs to never grab the antennas when someone was keying the mic, and it only takes one time for you to be holding onto that antenna when one of the echoes keys the mic for you to learn why you're not supposed to do that. And it's a lesson that you only learn once because you don't need to ever learn it again when, your entire body turns into like a radio emitter and you're vibrating and you can feel your bones cooking from the inside out. So
oh my goodness.
that's a great story. Thank you. So
well, good news is I still had kids.
Did you have still got both your ovaries?
Okay. I don't know. Something worked. I have 3 kids and they both seem pretty normal, or all 3 of them pretty normal.
They can see in the dark, though. I mean,
right,
that's the good thing.
So
they can see in the dark.
It worked out. So. Everything, works out.
Little back to a little bit of seriousness. What is the event your guys participating in tomorrow? What does it mean to you to be able to get out and help the USO?
Oh my goodness, I absolutely love the North Carolina USO. I worked with them a year and a half ago, and so I'm hoping that I end up running into some of the same people. We were before doing a children's event, so my children's books came into play there. So any money that we can raise for them, I saw firsthand the Christmas party that they threw for the military children, and they were walking the walk. They support the military families around here, and so our raffle here will be great for them. I'm excited to meet the Fort Bragg community and at the Dirtbag Ales.
Dirtbag Ales, yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a good time.
My neighbor works there. So.
I'm excited. I've heard great things about the place.
Yeah, it is. It's a fun place. They do drunken dodgeball. My son is one of the referees for their drunken dodgeball tournaments. They also do drunken axe throwing. No insurance. No insurance. I'm not kidding. You guys think I'm joking. They actually do drunken axe throwing. It really is. It's where all the Vikings went to.
I'm a Viking. I'm from Minnesota. That's what I do.
I always thought Vikings were from like Norway.
Well, that's where my ancestors are from. But we all moved to Minnesota and now we're Vikings.
I get it. Well, I want to thank you. Thank you for coming out, Julie, and being on here with us today. And I'm going to make sure that your book and all your books are going to be on the show notes page. If you guys want to go out and find these books and get some of these books for your kids, and do not get what they don't teach you in Deer River for your kids, or if you do get it for your kids, make sure it's for older kids who learn their lesson about not walking in front of radar emitters and frying their ovaries.
And it might teach you lessons if you're going to go into the military, so you might want to read it before as a preparation. But
good stuff. Good stuff. Well, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And we're going to move on, and you guys will hear us shuffling around again, and this will all be edited out, so I can make all kinds of really nasty jokes right now, but no. All right, so next up in the Changing Hearts and Minds hot seat, we've got Andrew. How do you say your last name?
Oak, like a tree.
Oak, and it's not
OCH.
It's OCH, so it's not OAK or anything. So forgive me for not knowing, but let me give you a little bit of introduction to Andrew Oak. Andrew Oak is known as the First Ladies Man, and not like the ladies man, but the First Ladies Man is in the First Lady of the United States. He is a television and multimedia producer for C-SPAN. He's just released a 2-volume book called Unusual for Their Time, On the Road with America's First Ladies. First of all, Andrew, welcome to Changing Hearts and Minds. And why don't you give us a little bit about yourself? And you are the one, as they said, you are the one civilian here. And so give us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. And I'll break the number one rule in broadcasting and interviewing as a multimedia producer. And I will correct the host right off the bat just for something very important, is that I was contracted to C-SPAN. So I'm not a C-SPAN producer. I produced for C-SPAN for the project First Lady's Influence and Image. But here's the important part of that distinction, and this will tell you a little bit about myself, is that it was not my idea. I did not set out to study the First Ladies. I'm not, or was not, a historian. I didn't take many history classes at University of Maryland. I took history of broadcasting. I took history of crime and punishment because I heard it was cool, and it was. And I got an A, which was fantastic. But I'm a drummer. I'm a musician. Music is my passion. I like motorcycles. I like life. I like adrenaline-filled action and adventure. I like stories. I like telling stories. I like telling stories that people haven't heard. I like telling stories that are true, which is very unusual for someone who grew up around Washington, D.C. And so when C-SPAN did come up with this idea, and a friend of mine approached me about being one of the producers for the show, it was an opportunity to tell stories about people that, not underdogs necessarily, but people that we didn't know about, people that we knew who they were, but we couldn't name them all, things like that. So the show idea that was brought to me by C-SPAN and the executive producers there was very intriguing. But in no way, shape, or form did I set out to become a First Lady's historian, expert, author, public speaker, or anything. These women are so fantastic and have been such a big part of the formation, the creation, the development, and the success, and continue to be, that their stories and their lives turned me into the First Lady's man. That one is more remarkable than the next, and the more we find out about each of them and looking back, and even the ones that we think we know everything about, we don't. They're truly remarkable. They're remarkable examples of Americans as American women, of human beings on planet Earth, and it's a privilege and an honor to be able to speak about these women the way I do.
That's man, he said it all, didn't he?
Off the top of my head.
Right off the top of his head. And I will break the second rule of broadcasting, which is to just completely accept the fact that he had to correct me because I did mess that up. So let me go back to that because
sure,
I
of course.
Know, you said you were contracted with them. What had you done in the past that led them to seek you out to?
Oh well, I'm after my professional band stopped touring in the late '90s, and I bounced around a little bit. I decided to use my degree. Radio, television, and film. And I'd done a lot of work for Fox, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, BBC, ASAP, VIP, WTF, yeah, FTW, so SOL. We could go on. TP, DSP. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. LSD. So as far as making my mark in DC and doing other type of multimedia, I did an ESPN 30 for 30 with a friend, worked on his project, had done a PBS documentary on the economy and other things, had done a lot of work actually in South Africa and Mozambique, which was this kind of field work that showed that I could do this kind of guerrilla style documenting and filming and videotaping and interviewing. And so I went out as this sort of one-man band. As my part for what I did for the series was I traveled to every library, school, church, cemetery, birthplace, train station, plantation farm, for every First Lady, Martha Washington through then Michelle Obama. And at the end, I pop out this Rain Man of First Ladies, and I haven't stopped talking about them since I started talking about them in late 2012. And the more people hear, the more they want to hear. So it was just a matter of being at the right place in the right time, having the right reputation for going out and working endless hours and being able to do it by myself and do in a very short amount of time what it takes a lot more people to do and get the story and bring it back effectively. So that's what it worked out very, very cool. It was just cool. It was just a cool thing to
right
stumble upon.
So I can put it in perspective for the listeners out there. Those of you who know me or have seen pictures of me, I want you to envision me on the weekends. And what I mean by that is, a Harley Davidson or a band T-shirt on, cargo shorts on with maybe a pair of skater shoes and tattoos from my wrist all the way up to my neck. And this is the man that's sitting next to me. So when you
and that's just the ink that you can see.
That's just the ink I can see. I mean, I'm sure there's a welcome aboard tattoo somewhere that we can't see. He is a ladies' man, as we say. So, but what I'm saying is that when you hear him talking and passionate about the First Ladies and about his historical depth dive into all of them, in your head you're probably envisioning somebody other than the guy
who I am.
Yeah, the guy that's sitting in front of you.
That's a not taking anything away from your keen observation, but that's an easy observation to make when you see me in this setting. But it also plays in my favor, and I know this. I'm not your usual vehicle for this information, and that makes me, for the first time in my life, being a white middle class guy, that I'm a minority. I'm a freak show on this circuit, and when I walk out at Williamsburg or the Smithsonian or presidential libraries and museums, historical sites where I just came from, and they're like, "Here he is, your First Ladies man, Andrew Oak." There's like a dog whistle that goes off, and the audience turns their heads like, "Who the hell is this guy?" And I come clomping across in a nice suit and a beautiful tie that my girlfriend picks out. She's my image consultant and image manager, and I need that. I'm a loose cannon. I need that kind of guidance and help and assistance, and no one better to do it than her. But I do. My dad said after a speech at the Smithsonian Institution, before we were going in, my dad said, do you have to wear the chain wallet? And I said, I do. I feel weird without it. Right. It's me. But you know, it's like I say, these women made me the first ladies, man. I didn't the same way that these first ladies don't study to be first ladies. They don't even necessarily choose to be first ladies. They are the most powerful and influential, unelected, unpaid women in the world, and it's just by virtue of marrying a guy, some knucklehead that says, I'm going to run for president, then he gets the nomination, then he wins the office, and then all of a sudden, they're in this role that we expect so much. We change the way we raise our children, the way we eat, our hairlines, our hemlines, our fashion, everything about what these women say and do. But they're not elected. They don't owe us anything. They don't have to do anything. Right. But the fact that they do because it's the right thing to do, and they use this platform, and now we typically, you know, we expect them. And even when they do things, as the current one is, we still give them a bunch of shit for it, which is not cool, in my opinion, because I'm the defender of these ladies. Not that they need me to be defending them, but I do. So you know, when I come out with this free speaking and this sort of loose attitude about them, and it's not stuffy and it's not scholarly and it's fun, at a majority of my speeches, unsolicited, I get people come up to me and say, if I had a history teacher like you, I would have paid attention, or this is great. The stuff, I mean, today, I almost didn't even want to say anything because I just found out rainbows are round. That's blown my mind, and I can barely concentrate on anything else, but these women, especially the ones no longer with us, speak from us and through me to tell these stories that just have to get out, because that's how important these women are. And I think that when people see me, even in a suit, without the ink and the stuff like that, but just that I am a young-ish in this world as well, as far as historians, and that I'm a man that studies women's history kind of thing. It's just unusual. So they're automatically visually interested in me and what I have to say. And when I do open my mouth up and this stuff comes out, people are like, huh, well, you could knock me over with a feather. It's an unusual. I realize I'm this unusual vessel for this information.
No, it's and you brought up a good point about how they don't put themselves in this position of to want to be what they are, and to identify with the listeners, to identify with that. Think about the military wives out there who were married to a 100%. Guy, and like an officer especially. They're thrown into this situation where they've got to toe a certain line. Now magnify that by the free world. And
everything, exactly.
Yeah, that's the first ladies of the United States. And looking back to people like Jackie Onassis, who pretty much changed the way women were looked at in America at the time she was there. She was such a stand. So talk to me about, because you mentioned that you know, Michelle Obama and now Melania Trump, you probably interact personally and actually have to deal with studying these women who are actually alive and in the actual position now. What was that? What is that like for you, and what's it like working and interacting with these current first ladies?
It's interesting because and Michelle and Melania share the distinction or the displeasure or the unfortunate luck of being the first social media first ladies.
Right.
I and everyone I think at this table is proof positive that anyone can have a website, anyone can write a book, and anyone can have an opinion and put it out there virtually unchecked, unregulated, unguarded, and untrue.
Welcome to Changing Hearts and Minds podcast, where I can say what I want.
Well, it is, but I mean, for the good fortune of the readers of my books and the people that are at my speeches, and I can speak, hopefully, I would think for my colleagues as well. We do our research, and our stories are our own, so we're not spewing out like inconvenient untruths and things like that. And I went to great lengths, and C-SPAN's reputation is impeccable, and I did everything within my human and unhumanly abilities to keep that intact. And so what I write about is what I've been told, and it's not opinion. It's what I've experienced, what I've seen, what I've read, what I've studied. But every day, Michelle Obama and Melania Trump have dealt with this type of judgment on a whole other platform where people feel very emboldened. People feel like their opinions matter. Not that they don't, but you know that you can just slam someone. Yes. Relentlessly with no recourse and no one calling you on this to be fact. So I sort of get shrapnel from that when I post something about Michelle Obama really when I post something about anyone. But when you go back far enough, it's not that people don't care, but people aren't interested in saying Martha Washington is a jerk. Right. No one would say that. Right. Or no one would even say that Jackie Kennedy's a jerk or anything like that. But when you get into the modern first ladies, people do. So I find myself not defending a political party, but defending a human being that all they're trying to do is make the world a better place.
Right.
Whether and for the most part they stay out of politics and policy, but some don't, and you get your hands dirty. And I don't live in a world of unicorns and cotton candy clouds and lollipop highways where I know I'm in politics. I know that these women are attached to politics, but I leave the scandals, the salaciousness, the affairs, and all the other stuff to other people, the negativity to other people, because there's plenty. It's not that it's not true. It's that that's not me, and that's not what I talk about. I focus on the good that they try and do, the women that they are. They were all girls, young women, girlfriends, mothers, aunts, cousins, grandmothers, widows. These are real people, and at each of these locations and each of the women I studied, they stepped off the pages of history and out of the oil paintings. They became real people. I had something in common with every one of them, just as we all do. And when you understand that they are these real people, you kind of understand some of the decisions they made and the position they're in, understanding again that they are unpaid and unelected. They don't have to do anything.
Right. It's a good point. And God, man, you're shot out of a cannon, aren't you?
Charlie Bunce, if you're listening, he says I wake up shot out of a cannon. That and 9 Diet Cokes at dinner would. I mean, seriously, this guy kept bringing the Diet Cokes, and I didn't want to not drink them, but this is pretty much me the way I wake up anyway.
That's fantastic. So here's what I'm interested in.
Sure.
I want you to dig deep into all the research you've done and everything, and maybe something that a lot of people don't know is common. Tell us a story about one of the first ladies that isn't common knowledge, but also is just like maybe something that you just found like a wow.
Yeah, well, I got one. I say this actually at a lot of my speeches, and this is also in the books as well. But what's the first thing, an image, an artifact, a physical thing that you can touch or use or feel when you think of first ladies? What's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Like the silver or the wares that they have at the tables. Don't they all?
Oh, the China pattern. That's a pretty good answer. It's not the number one answer, but that's okay. The number one answer is dresses.
Oh, okay.
But everyone said because of the exhibit.
Right.
But China's another good example of things that first ladies are associated with. But
let's go back then.
Okay.
I would say dresses.
What's dresses? Hey, number one answer, man.
Right,
if we were playing Family Feud, you'd just give me the number one answer.
That's right.
But in 95% of the rooms, 95% of the time, 95% of the people say dresses because of the Smithsonian Institution's exhibit on first ladies.
Right.
Now, what very few people, myself included, growing up in Washington, D.C., going to this exhibit and these museums countless times for every field trip, what I didn't know was who donated the first dress. And I thought, well, who do you think?
I'll be honest with you, I would probably say Jackie Onassis.
Okay, right, sure. And that's a great answer. That's a solid answer. It's wrong. Right. I would say I thought, well, Martha Washington, why not? She's the first. But she didn't even have an inaugural ball. And I think, oh my gosh, there's so much. So when I was there studying a lot of these first ladies and looking at their dresses and looking at their China collections and other artifacts behind the scenes also out on exhibit, the woman there, Lisa Kathleen Grady, the curator of the political collection at the Museum of American History, said, we should show you the first one. I'm like, absolutely, yeah.
I am the first
lay it on me. Let's see it. She said, it's Helen Taft. And I went, Helen Taft? Dude, tell me honestly, you wouldn't have named Helen Taft if I asked you to name 30 first ladies.
Nope.
No one in this room would have named Helen Taft. Wouldn't have done it. But Helen Taft is the reason why we have inaugural gowns, which is the number one answer for what people think of around the world when we think of first ladies.
Was it something that she came up with on her own, or
she
just happens to be the one?
She was first lady at the time when two socialites were putting together the first ladies exhibit. They were doing a luncheon for Dolly Madison, who you mentioned Dolly Madison would have been another great guest.
Right.
First dress. Why not? Someone's got to be the first. So they went to Helen Taft and said, you're the sitting first lady. We have to have something of yours for this exhibit. Well, ladies listening, guys that are in the know, it's kind of like homecoming or the prom or your wedding. If they see you in the dress once, you're not going to wear it again. It's kind of it's dead to you. So she says, well, hey, here's this great inaugural gown that I paid a bunch of money for and had stitched and embroidered in the Philippines. That's a whole other story and part of the book that you'll have to read and get into. But it's a good one. It's a good story. So she donates this dress. So now, retroactively, we've gone back and we, the people, have a dress to represent, most oftentimes, an inaugural gown for every First Lady, Martha Washington, through now Melania Trump. Melania Trump's dress is there. But the thing that surprises people, and this is what I use that as this symbol, as this story to say that these women, even the ones you can't name, have affected your modern world.
Absolutely.
And then I take it all the way back to the Revolutionary War and say that America wouldn't be America if George Washington married any other woman than Martha Washington. George Washington is not her first husband.
No,
I'll tell you that. But not everyone does,
yeah,
and it wasn't on the tip of my tongue, and we're not really taught that, and that's not what you think of.
Right.
But during the Revolutionary War, George Washington wrote letters that said, "I don't think clearly. I need my wife at my side." And Martha Washington went at great personal risk to nearly every winter encampment of the Revolutionary War, not to make cookies, not to sew uniforms, but to consult and cavort and advise her husband who couldn't think clearly. So we fast forward into modern times and think of when Ronald Reagan said, "I don't make a single decision without passing it by Nancy." And everyone went bananas.
Nancy's
when
making the decision.
Exactly. And they're like, "We didn't elect her." It's been going on the whole time.
Right.
These women have been there. By nature and virtue of who they married, they have the ear, they share the pillow, the bed of the, making air quotes, most powerful man in the world, whatever. They're there. They're in the room. They're part of the conversations. And George Washington married up. Martha Dandridge Custis, as a widow, was way more privileged and had finances beyond belief. She's actually, you can compare it to modern day, she's the first successful female CEO in the New World and the most desirable widow in the colonies. And enter George Washington, boom, America. And America looks very different. The world looks very different without America.
Yes.
I mean, World War I, World War II, Harley Davidson, Apple computers, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, everything. Nothing the
Chris
same.
Schaefer.
All because Chris Schaefer. All these things because of a 26-year-old widow that was appealing to George Washington.
And just so I can, because those of you who know my podcast is generally a history podcast, I will throw my little whippet in there that she wasn't the only general's wife who couldn't function without his wife around. General Grant was well known to have
very much
not been able to function without his wife. As a matter of fact, he was kicked out of the military when he was sent to Oregon because he said he was separated from his wife, led him into drinking. And the same thing. She was with him on the battlefield along with his horse.
Lucy Hayes, with Rutherford B. Hayes,
Right.
traveled to Civil War encampments for her.
Right.
It goes on.
These women are just phenomenal. And most guys who have been married for a long time, myself included, will say that our wives are generally the ones who keep us stable, keep us pointed in the right direction. They're our moral compass and everything else. And then you multiply that again, like you said, by freedom. But that's what these first ladies were.
And on the world stage, in front of everybody. I always throw Laura Bush out there to say, like, this is a librarian from Texas who wanted better education for children. On 9/11, everyone in the world's lives changed, but hers changed in front of everyone. With no training, with no First Ladies 101, going to places, as you guys in the military probably couldn't have found on a map before you were told where you were going, couldn't spell the names of the country, this, that, and the other. And they load up Laura Bush, and she goes out and champions women's rights and women's education for the entire world. It's just remarkable to think of someone just turning on a dime like that on the world stage.
Right, and not most of the time, not by their own choice.
No.
Or
nor training.
Right. Andrew Oak. Damn, man. I mean,
there it is.
Wow.
Unusual for their time. On the Road with America's First Ladies, Volume 1 and 2. These stories and more. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. They will be linked in the show notes page. And I will also, guys, I forgot to tell Julia, but I will also have all your guys' social media accounts will also be linked on there. So, Julia, I'll give you a chance in a second, but do you want to spit out where, like, your Twitter and all that kind of
stuff?
Well,
if all that stuff's up there, I do want to say this before I forget. It is an absolute, I don't say this in jest or lightly or ingenuously. It is an absolute honor to be able to give back to veterans and troops and military personnel and their families by being a part of Tactical 16, not being a member of the military. I've got 3 uncles that were all Army, Navy, and Air Force. My girlfriend's father, Navy, and served in Desert Storm, and so there's a long history. No one can get away from that in this country for good reasons. But for me personally, to be able to give a little bit back and work with a company that does so many good things and publishes these stories and helps in the way they do, it is an honor and a privilege. So thank you very seriously for having me on.
It's my honor to have you on, sir. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Shake your hand. You guys don't get to see that, I know, but I did shake the guy's hand. And we're going to go ahead and shuffle seats again here, one more again, and bring on our last and most distinguished guest, Gordon Chris Schaefer. Finally, on today's episode of Changing Hearts and Minds, I'd like to introduce, and let me introduce him a little bit more with myself talking about it. Robert Dvorak was a journalist for 50 years. He was New York-based AP journalist. He covered everything from the Legionnaires' outbreak in Philadelphia, 3 Mile Island nuclear accident, which was otherwise known as America's Chernobyl. And in 1989, when I was sitting at home in New Jersey watching the World Series and Candlestick Park completely shut off, he covered the earthquake that interrupted not only that, but then not too long after that in Milwaukee, the Jeffrey Dahmer story. He has authored 4 books that have gone on everything from the Korean War to Penn State's Jerry Sandusky controversy. And he's currently an independent media consultant and public speaker. He advocates on behalf of veterans. He has taught several courses at the University of Pittsburgh. He's married with 2 daughters and 5 grandkids. Welcome to the show. Welcome, Mr. Dvorak.
Hey, it's great to be here, but at my age and what I've been through, it's great to be anywhere.
I don't even know if I should laugh at that or if I feel ashamed that I laughed at it. You know what I mean? It's like you want to laugh, but then you're like, oh, man, when guys are older like that and they make jokes like that, you're not sure whether or not you should be laughing at it. So he has a new book called "Drive On: The Uncensored World of Bedouin Bob and the All Americans." And I'm going to go out on a little bit of a limb here, and I'm going to say that you're Bedouin Bob.
Hey, good guess. Ding, ding, ding. Number one answer.
That's right. Number one answer is not dresses. It's not China. It is Bedouin Bob. Is Robert Dvorak. Tell us a little bit about your new book, sir.
Well, I had gone to Saudi Arabia on assignment to cover the war in 1990 during the buildup. And before I left New York, my boss told me to keep a journal because it's going to be such a big, different assignment. So I kept a journal the whole time. And I was there, interacted with all the military branches and got to see the home of Muhammad and birthplace of Islam and the Middle East for the first time. And through just absolute great fortune of mine, I was the big thing for any media member over there was to get on a media pool. It only there were like thousands of journalists, so select group, 36 of us, got to go out actually with the troops, and just sheer blind luck, I drew the 82nd Airborne, and I went through the ground war with them, and it was at the time, everybody saw this on television. You could watch it at home on your TV set.
I remember I did.
Right. I was under operational security. I couldn't write what was really going on. And what I could write, I was pecking out on a manual Olivetti portable typewriter, and you hand it to the censor who puts it on a C-130, and they fly it back to the rear. And if it makes it back, it's, the average length of time for a story to get back was 3 days, which was the average length of time during the Civil War for a story to get back. So it wasn't exactly instantaneous. So I lived this war in a vacuum. I went through a version of what I was going through while everybody else was watching it on TV. So when I got back, I thought I'd write about it right away, but it didn't work out that way. And it took 26 years to get it done, but I was retired as an active journalist then, so I just put all my thoughts together and I wrote it down, and I found that nobody was interested in the conventional publishing world about publishing this story, but I found Eric's group, Tactical 16, and he jumped on it. And to my eternal thanks, that I got this book published.
One thing I'm interested to know is, and it's only because I find myself with the same problems when I write back just 5-6 years ago, remembering certain details and how stories go. And I know you said you kept a journal, but how hard was it? And being a journalist, I'm sure writing all the time, you're used to writing spontaneously right after you see something. So how difficult was it, or what were the strategies you used to help you keep on track with getting the story maybe not right, but as accurate as you could get it, considering that it had been 20 years since.
Yeah, 26 years. But you can cross-reference things. You know, it's so easy now with the internet to research, and I had a library of the stories that I had written while I was over there. And you don't put everything you know into a story that's for public consumption.
Right.
Yeah. So I had the leftover material, and I had the timeline, and Julia said it's, writing's easy. It is. All you have to do is open up a vein in your wrist and bleed on the keyboard. That's how easy it is. The only worst thing than going through a war is having to write about it after. It's a bear. It's because you got to relive all that stuff.
Right. It's like Chris said, opening up old wounds and demons that are out there. But now I don't know if it was anything was therapeutic for you, but I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of other authors who maybe were working through things like that. Would you agree that even though it is like opening up old wounds, that is it sometimes better to get out there and write about it so that you can maybe not confront them, but get them on paper so you can see them? And it might be a subjective answer, but I'd just like to hear your point of view on it.
Well, I think it's essential. I think I didn't know I came home from this experience with emotional scars.
Right.
I did not know that, but then I found out later on that I did. And the thing with any wound or any scar, you got to open it up, clean it out, disinfect it, and then let it heal back, and it becomes whole again. It was like a big relief, a big burden that was lifted, like taking a rock out of the rucksack that I got this done, because this story lived in me, and it wasn't going to get out unless I just put my butt in the seat and started writing it.
Right, and thank God for the guys at Tactical 16 for, because
absolutely.
I think there's a lot of guys out there nowadays who have these stories that they want to tell, or they need to tell, and they go out there and you get inundated in a post-war, or even in the later part of a war culture, where there's so many stories out there that come out that the publishing companies may get just tracer burnout or just overzealous, where they just get too much, they can't, if it's not some hot, great story, they don't pick it up. So I want to give credit to Tactical 16 for giving guys that opportunity because who knows what the long-term carry, eventually would have come to a head with maybe you carrying that information around. So let's talk a little bit about when you was that your first experience with being embedded with military directly? I know that you had done a lot of work in the past talking about the Korean War and you had family in Vietnam and all that kind of stuff, but was this your first time being at that level of command and seeing how things went up at that level?
In the field with 11 badasses in actual shooting war? Yeah, actually it was. That's an eye-opener. But if I could back up just a little bit, and how lucky your listeners are to have me on the show. I was I had the last lottery number ever called in the last draft ever held in 1972, right at the end of Vietnam. So I can't say I'm the last draftee, but it was my number that was the last number called.
Wow, that's...
Yeah, and it went all volunteer after that.
The hell of my listeners. I'm the lucky one now.
Yeah, well... And
right
we're transitioning to an all-volunteer force, and, that was a little wrenching experience, They were getting the guys from... the county jails and
right. Well, my father-in-law was one of them, and that's not a hit on him. He openly admits it that he spent 20 years in the military afterwards, but he was one of those guys got in a little bit of trouble in California, and was told by a judge, well, you can own what you did, or you can go to the military. He goes, because you already were a draft dodger at that moment, so it's like you might as well just go do it. And he ended up spending 20 years in the military. But yes, I could see that. We didn't have that with me and Chris's and Julia's military where we had those guys that didn't want to be there or had other plans and it wasn't their main focus. So it's an interesting situation to be in, and it's interesting to hear people talk about it because you really do see a difference between an all volunteer army and then basically not subjugated but a military that's forced into serving.
Conscripted, yes.
Conscripted.
Right, and the thing is, if you look at, and this is true in my whole journalistic career, and I think it's absolutely true now, how many journalists have military experience? how many people on cable TV news know the difference between a brigade and a battalion?
Right.
How many people have ever, had to do push-ups in the mud with some guy in a Smokey the Bear hat challenging your family tree, that kind of stuff. And there is a great disconnect, a tremendous disconnect between what the media writes about and what really goes on a day-to-day basis on the ground level.
Absolutely. And I think that in our war, me, Chris, and Julia's war, had Geraldo had that 3-day wait period, he may have lasted a little bit more than 10 days on the ground in Iraq. Because if I remember correctly, sitting in Erbil at the schoolhouse in Erbil inside the day room watching TV that day, the entire look on every single guy in third group, and I think even Chris might have been in there, the look on our face when we're like, oh my God, what did he just told the entire war plan to the entire, so, and he wasn't doing anything he thought was wrong. It was just
right, that's his job.
It's his job to do, but had he had that 3-day break, he may not have been, sent out of country unceremoniously and maybe, like I said, don't think the guy was trying to do anything wrong, but man, that was a moment that was interesting. I'd like to know a little bit about what kind of things did you take as far as like leadership and stuff like that did you learn from your experiences with those guys on the ground as a journalist?
Well, one of them is real easy. I mean, when your creed is all the way, I mean, that's get it done, mission first. And you're going to sacrifice to get it done, but you have to get it done. During that experience, I have to live with that now. And sometimes I just curse them. I just like to sit down in my lazy boy and watch TV. And
not drive for 10 hours from Pittsburgh.
Right. But there is something about that commitment to get the job done, to go all the way. And I live by that creed. I really do. And I think it's important to do that. One of the crazy things is a journalist in New York City. I mean, they don't just hire the guy from the local weekly to go up to New York to be a national writer. But I would go to these stories like the earthquake in San Francisco and Jeffrey Dahmer and these other fun assignments. And we always called it parachuting into a story because you get sent from New York and there's people locally on the ground, and I'm there to add an extra layer. But we called it parachuting into the story. There are similarities between what professional journalists do and what professional soldiers do. It's just they're not that apparent. Like, for example, I learned how to drink a field coffee. You rip open the pack, toss the crystals into your mouth, and get a swig of canteen water, and it tastes like crap. But it'll get you going in the morning.
But the coffee's going to taste like crap because it's military coffee anyway.
Well,
so whether or not it
tastes like, it's good for cuts and bruises and tastes like turpentine. We used to sing that.
So I see that, and we talked about it earlier, that you do a lot of public speaking on veterans issues and veterans awareness. What issues for veterans do you find are the most critical nowadays for awareness, like to get out there? And we can talk about the suicide and everything like that, but beyond that, there's other issues out there. And what do you, as a person who speaks on behalf of Veterans for Awareness, see as an issue that needs to be talked about a little bit more, maybe a little bit more openly?
I think that maybe the main issue is that feeling of being disconnected. The military experience, the burden falls on such a small percentage now, less than 1%, defending the 99%. And nobody can relate to that. It's very difficult to relate to that or even ask about it. And if you feel disconnected, you can feel isolated. You feel isolated, then it can lead you down to a lot of dark places. So I think that's the main thing. And to stay connected really with your brothers and sisters who you served with, because they go through the same things.
And so, piggybacking on that whole idea, what challenges do you think veterans currently face that are similar to the challenges that they faced in the past?
Yeah, soldiers are soldiers. You go through that and you become a different person.
Absolutely.
All the molecules in your body are rearranged. Right. And there's that, you don't even know it's happening. It's so subtle. But when it does happen, then you realize the light goes on, you have the epiphany. And to be able to deal with that, to keep the essence of yourself, and to transition back to some semblance of civilian life. And I think that's a different path for everybody. Like war is a different experience for you and I. You could be 20 feet away and I could tell you something that happened that, you thought was irrelevant. That's the way it works.
And what are some of the things that are different that you think nowadays that maybe veterans in the past haven't seen that veterans nowadays face that's stark difference in the old school?
Yeah, I think everything's just so up-tempo now.
Right.
Everything's so technologically advanced, and, it happens at light speed. And as you're going through the process, the time slows down in the moment for you, but you have to deal with all those things later on. I identify a lot with the Vietnam guys, and actually I'm working on a new book, 82nd Airborne in Vietnam, and Golden Brigade.
3rd Brigade?
Yeah.
3rd Brigade in Vietnam?
Yeah. And it's an officially licensed name at the Army, the Golden Brigade. So it was 2 battalions of 505 and one of the 508. Got sent over on emergency deployment for the Tet Offensive. Stayed for 22 months, fought up north, fought down south, and did everything they were asked to do, and didn't get the kindest reception when they got back home.
No,
either,
they didn't.
because
Also,
the country changed.
It's also something that's not well known, but there's
Correct.
two of the Medal of Honors that the 82nd has in its ranks come from their time in Vietnam, and it's such an unknown. You go on Fort Bragg, and it's not even something that's well known on Fort Bragg. You go to Fort Campbell, and you go to 101st. World War II and Vietnam are all over the place as far as historically referenced, but there's a disconnect with the time that the 82nd spent, 3rd Brigade specifically, in Vietnam, where you have roads on Fort Bragg that are named after all these guys that have won Medal of Honors, but I've never seen either one of the Vietnam veterans from the 82nd have a road named after them on Fort Bragg, and that's something that I think that maybe stories like yours are going to bring to light and maybe get these guys a little bit more recognition that they deserve, because they are a little bit almost like a forgotten portion of 82nd's history.
Overlooked. It's a missing chapter of their history. Actually, one of the things that's going to happen next week is a plaque dedication at the Special Ops Museum for Felix Conde Falcone, posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 2014, was killed in 1969, charged 3 bunker complexes to save his guys, and his RTO and one of his squad members who got shot that day are going to be here.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And his son, who lives in Texas, Richard, who knew nothing about his dad until his RTO contacted him on New Year's Eve in 2004, said, "I served with your dad. If you want to know what happened, call me." And he did, yeah. So it shows, again, that the brotherhood that exists, and 2, you're really not ever done with this. It comes back around 50 years later. It's going to happen.
Right, and maybe not even 50 years later. Me and Chris both served together in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and what, 10 years? 10 years we ain't seen each other, and here we are back again talking to each other. So absolutely agree with you there. That's fantastic. I'm glad you put that out. I didn't know that. That's another little bonus. I'll make sure that we link and talk about that in the show notes page also. So the veterans that are out there listening, and this is something I always like to hit guys on that are in the know and have seen a lot of experience with guys transitioning. What do you feel veterans carry out of their time in service that is most beneficial to the civilian or the corporate world that maybe a veteran that's transitioning out is not aware of, that they need to be told, okay, you've got this skill or this piece of some kind of thing that you have that you're not aware of that's going to help you when you get out?
Maybe it's not such a specific skill, but an attitude, commitment, dedication, selflessness, service. Who wouldn't want to hire somebody like that? We're all looking for, self-absorbed narcissists who think only of themselves. How's that working out?
Fair enough. Good stuff. That's good. Yeah.
I'm selling a lot of books, is what I'm doing.
I didn't mean that personally.
No.
Yeah.
You can even edit that out if I want.
No, that's fantastic. You don't get edited out at all on this show. You are. Matter of fact, I might bring you back for more.
Can I tell you one anecdote from my time in?
Absolutely, please. I'd love to hear a story about your time with the 82nd.
Right, because I'm a journalist, and they call my name. I'm on Army Combat Pool number 1. I get off the bus. They said, "You're with the 82nd Airborne." I said, "Oh, great." this is going to be fantastic. And I spent the night the bombing started. I was at division headquarters, Champion, Maine, in Saudi Arabia, and they were giving us these nerve gas pills to make us more likely to withstand a nerve gas attack, although they had never tested this on anybody in the field.
Sounds like Methiquin.
Yeah, well, it was a pyridostigmide bromide, and I looked it up later. There were only a few side effects, erectile dysfunction, all this. But so I go from the division headquarters, and the commanding general, Jim Johnson, wanted to make sure that any journalists that were assigned to the 82nd did not sit at division headquarters. Go out in the field. You go with the soldiers. You want to find out what this is like. So I showed up at 2nd Brigade headquarters, and Ron Rokas was a colonel, 325 Airborne Infantry Regiment. He said, "Hey, you want to go to war? I'll take you to war. I'll be happy. You eat what we eat. You live where we live. You go where we go. But you got to join the unit." And he handed me 2 sets of 82nd Airborne patches. Now that's heavy. Yeah, so, and I knew right away what this was going to be like. So here I am, first day, I got my 82nd, I carried them in my pouch with my credentials. And this happened 5 or 6 times, so it sounds apocryphal. But somebody says, did you volunteer to come out here, or did they order you to? And I said, well, I could go back to the hotel anytime I wanted to, but I want to be with you guys, because this is where the action is. I said, okay, are they paying you any extra money? I said, well, my organization doubled the indemnity on my life insurance policy, but I'm not getting any, like, combat pay or anything. He said, well, we're going to war. Where's your weapon? I said, under the Geneva Conventions, I'm a civilian and accompanying U.S. troops, so I can't carry a weapon, but I do have this manual typewriter and some notebooks. If we jump, are you going to jump too? Oh, absolutely. I'm here to go where you go. And, in World War II, there were journalists jump with the 82nd.
Yes, there was.
And it happened in Korea with the 173rd. So he said, okay, let me get this straight. You don't have to be here. You're not getting any extra money. We're going into combat and you don't have a weapon. And if we jump, you're going to jump too. Mister, you're crazier than us. So I share the same mental disorder as
the same mental disorder as the rest of us.
Right.
And we're all
most physically fit alcoholics in the world too. That's the
greatest article ever written. Smoke Bomb Hill. So more beer in one night than any place on earth. I remember that's when I first showed up to the 82nd. They're like, "Welcome to the 82nd. When you run down our dens, it's going to smell like an old beer room."
Well, Smoke Bomb Hill is where they have a monument to 7 combat engineers that got killed. And actually, I had gone through that same village like 15 minutes before them.
Oh, really?
And they came in afterwards to clean up the ordnance from the airstrip at Rafah, Al Saman. And I always remembered those guys. Last year when I was down, I went up to Smoke Bomb Hill and looked up because it's part of the contract is to remember.
Right.
It's a risky business. And you take the risk, knowing the risk, and you do it anyway. And I admire that. I think that's just, incredible. But I also was, if I could say this, on Veterans Day last year, I was with the 82nd Airborne Division Association. And I said the words over Leonard Funk's grave, Medal of Honor from World War II, Battle of the Bulge, and for Matthew Ridgway, who's buried in Pittsburgh.
Right.
Yeah. So, and responsible for the All-American Soldier being the song of the 82nd Airborne. He was the one who
is that right? I didn't know that. I was in the 82nd choir and I didn't even know that.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I spent a year in the 82nd course. Then I decided I wanted to be something more than a singer. So
it was the general in the Vietnam era.
General Crocker?
Seitz.
Oh, Seitz.
Who was the one who actually formed the choir.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. In 1966, 67, somewhere in there.
Thank God for you, because I wouldn't know anything about the 82nd.
Well, see, I've learned this stuff too. It's an educational process. I always looked at being a journalist as a way to really find out really neat, meaningless minutia about stuff. And because who's going to know, who's going to care?
Well, if we don't have journalists and people who are writing books on the First Ladies and the 82nd and life lessons from Deer River. We wouldn't know. There's so many things out there, and that's bringing it all back around. That's why what Tactical 16 and what you guys are doing is so important to the community here at Fort Bragg and the USO in North Carolina. And not only are you guys helping them out with bringing funds in, but you guys are also helping out people who are trying to get their story out. And I hope that you guys that are listening out there that hear these guys talking and hear what it's like, and you can hear that, like Mr. Dvorak said, there's a burden that's been lifted when he tells these stories. And the only way we're going to remember certain things, and much like the Spartans and they made their soldiers and they made their combat veterans talk about combat and talk about what they went through. And that's the important part of these stories and talking about stuff is we don't want to it's not something you should be ashamed of, your time in service. It's not something, and no matter what horrible things you were exposed to, no matter what kind of things you did, you're not a bad person because you participated in war. And you should not be ashamed about telling the stories. And if you carry the stuff around with you far too long, it's going to become something that's shameful to you, and you're going to not want to talk about it. So talk about it. And for those of you out there who aren't veterans, ask them. Nobody wants you to say, hey, how many people did you kill? But that doesn't mean you can't ask them about their combat experiences and help those people get out those stories so that they're not carrying them around and become ashamed of those stories, because there's nothing to be ashamed about by going out and serving your country and putting other people's lives, more importantly, in front of your own. And like you said, sir, willing to lay down your life knowing what is going to happen to you. I am a 95% disabled veteran, back broken in 4 places, TBI, PTSD, medically retired after 18 years, didn't even get to serve all 20 years of my service. And I would do it all again knowing that I still would end up in the same place. And I think that my ability to get out there and talk about it has got me to that point. And I think there's a lot of guys out there that can get to that point also. So I want to thank all you guys for coming out tonight and talking about these things. Chris, what you guys are doing is fantastic. You authors, I want to thank all you guys for coming out. I really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your night. I know you got a very busy weekend. Tomorrow's going to be a really busy day for you. And I think you guys are going to have a good. Shannon's really got things set up for you guys over there, and that place is awesome. You guys stick around, throw some axes, play some drunken dodgeball. We'll get my son out there. You guys can throw axes at him. It should be a good time. That boy he's been too sheltered. He needs some axes thrown at him by a female Viking from Minnesota.
How about an axe catcher?
He catches axes. That's what I told him. You've got to catch them, son. That's what I tell him.
If you can dodge an axe,
you can dodge a ball. True story.
It was my honor to be here.
Thank you, guys. And guys, go to my website, find these guys' books. Go to Tactical 16, buy these guys' books up. Support this effort. Support Chris Schaefer and Tactical 16 and what they're doing. Support these authors and God, there's not one here that I think is one you should skip. So they're all going to be on the show, and I'm going to go out and buy all these books myself. I already actually bought 2 of them, but I'm not going to tell you guys which 2 I bought. But I'm going to know a lot about the first ladies here pretty soon. But the rest of these books.
Wait a minute, that means he didn't?
No, I did. Only because I want to know what you know about Dolly Madison. So
I know good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you guys. For those of you guys out there, remember that your entire life is in your hands. Don't let anybody tell you what you can or can't do. You are only limited by your own mental capacity. Don't put yourself inside of a box. Don't put yourself inside of a cage. Free the oppressed. De-oppressively bear. We will talk to you guys next week. Thank you.
Change your POV and all of it shows can help and heal and even educate. We want you to help us help others. Visit our Patreon page at www.patreon.com/changeyourpov. Become a patron of our network and our mission.